Hi, I'm Andrew McCrae. Welcome to our farm and ranch in northwest Missouri. My great-great-grandfather settled here in 1910, and I'm the fifth generation to grow crops and livestock here. As a farmer myself, I know the highs and lows of this life, the issues we confront every day, some new, some as old as farming itself. This show is a place to talk with farmers and others in the ag industry about topics that mean something to us, topics that can improve the present and future of our operations. This is Farming the Countryside. Mike and Dana Camblin join me, and they are in Colorado, northwestern Colorado, ranching there. We're going to be speaking not only about their ranch, but some of the grazing work they do and how they're really working to not only get better grass, but better soil out there. Mike and Dana, thanks for joining me. And perhaps I should just let you all start by talking about your ranch and where you're located. And that where you're located definitely has a lot to do with how you have to do things out there with your grazing your livestock there.
Yeah, so as you stated, we're in northwest Colorado, a little podunk town named Maybell. We're on Dana's family's ranch, and high desert, cold, harsh winters and hot, dry summers. I think our average rainfall is anywhere from 11 to 12 inches a year. And so as a cattle rancher, grass and soil health is pertinent to us, and so it's one of the most important things of us to watch and monitor and take care of, and so we look at it very closely because not only financially does it help us to do that, but it just you got to take care of it or it won't always be there.
Right. You talk about the stock that you have as a cow-calf operation. Is that what you have? And then about how many can you stock? And maybe that ranges because of the time of year, but give us an idea of what that territory is like out there.
Yeah, so we were a cow-calf operation, and then we had a really severe drought in 20 and 21, so we decided to destock that. And now we've become more of a seasonal operation where we run mostly stockers through May through the end of September. And we were running about 550 head of stockers this year.
All right. Do you think the drought you mentioned, of course, made you change to seasonal? Did a lot of folks out there have to do that? Was that just a personal choice, or how did you come to that decision?
Well, at that time, we had just took in ranching for profit. And so we were also looking at our gross margins and all that. And our cows just weren't performing like we wanted them also. So there were several elements in that decision. It wasn't just we're dry. We just got to get rid of them. It was a big decision for us.
So this discussion, then, did that lead into some of what you were doing with how to graze, or were you already thinking about that as far as grazing systems and so forth that we'll get into?
We really hadn't thought about that, but we did know that we needed to change our grazing somewhat to become, we were more set stocked and not doing more rotational. And now we're more adaptive grazers and looking at more of the soil health, because like Mike said, the soil is what builds everything else.
So talk about that for a moment, the soil health, because I think a lot of us as cattle folks, we think about the grass, and maybe we don't think of, obviously the grass grows from the soil, but we don't sometimes think about the soil health. What types of things then did you begin to do in order to focus on soil health so that you had better grazing ground there?
Yeah, so I think my number one thing that I really focus on now is the bare ground, because we are in high desert. We're in a sandy loam area. The heat and everything from the bare ground. So trying to keep the cover, just learning about that was a big deal for us.
Did you do some things then to get more cover on that ground? Is that what you've tried to do?
Yeah, we started our, after the drought, we didn't fully stock. We cut our numbers back for a couple years just to help get that growth and stockpile there to get that cover, the litter on the ground.
Okay. Mike, what type of grass are we talking about there? I mean, high desert, what kinds of things are you growing and what are they eating there?
Our predominant grass, which surprised us quite a bit when we started looking at this, is actually needle and thread. And I know a lot of ranchers are, cringe at that, but that's what we have. We've got some wheat grasses that were actually planted in there, and we've got some uranium mining and stuff that went on, and they planted wheat grass as a tool to bring it back, and and then we've got a lot of sagebrush. Sagebrush is also a predominant brush in our area, so we look at that really close too. We started setting up transects throughout the ranch and measuring and taking pictures so we knew exactly what we had and what changes came about through the years. And we look at those transects really close on our management decisions. Are we going the right way? Are we getting the litter that we need? Are we closing the gap on the bare ground? Are we seeing more brush than grass? Are we seeing grasses that the cattle like? And we even measure, we look at, what the microbes are doing. So we look at a lot.
Yeah, yeah. With the grass that you mentioned there, and that you're talking about different grass than a lot of folks would have, depending on where they live in the country. Are you trying then to introduce different types of grasses? And if you are, then is that something that you can do by actively going out there and doing that, or is it just pulling back the numbers of cattle that you have to let some of that other grass come on up through?
I think we are actively looking at that. One of the grasses that we're trying to get rid of is cheatgrass. Everybody's got a cheatgrass problem, and so we've changed our way of grazing to see if we can get the cheatgrass to go away and get some of these more desirable grasses to come. We destocked pretty strongly during the drought. Now we're kind of getting to where we're running in the numbers we should. But I think the way we graze, we're actually changing. We're changing the landscape to where we're getting the desirable grass that we want. So it's not necessarily decreasing our numbers. It's just how we graze.
Dana, we talked there earlier about your family, and I think your daughter put together the website, which folks should go out and look at with Camblin Livestock. Am I correct? Did your kids then kind of through some of their projects get this started? Because you were already in the fencing business, is that correct? And then this kind of gave birth to more cattle business, is that right?
Yeah. So we lease my family's ranch, and it's 170 years that it's been in operation. And so when Mike we came back to this area. Mike was fencing and then also had a construction business. So the kids and I helped my parents quite a bit. And so in trade, they started and through 4-H and FFA, they started building their own cow herd. And so when we transitioned out of the fencing and construction business, then we decided to go, purchase more cattle and go that way.
Okay. Let's get over to this fencing and grazing side. I know that one of the things and part of the way that we got connected was through virtual fence. And I think a lot of people know what that is, but maybe some don't. So maybe we just start there. Talk about the virtual fencing and then how you've applied it in your operation there.
So the virtual fencing, one of our pastures that we have is through Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and it's over 13,000 acres. And they wouldn't allow us to cross fence it. And with the type of grazing we're doing, with the regenerative grazing, we like to see it rest at least a year before we go back in there. And that's really hard to do with one 13,000 acre pasture. So we started looking really close at this virtual fencing because we could actually fence them without a physical fence. And then the expense of that was quite a bit. Also, you have to have towers. Those are 10 to 12,000 a piece. You have to have collars. Those are $55 a piece. And so CPW told us, we'll buy a couple of towers if you guys are willing to try this. And that's kind of how we got started with that. And I'm not saying there's not some hiccups with the virtual fence, but it has been a really good tool for us.
Yeah. So of course you're managing this a little differently. Some people listening to this will say 13,000 acres in one patch. That's pretty big, especially, when I come from Missouri, and 13,000 acres sounds like about half the county. But whenever you do that, then how big of, I don't know if we want to call them paddocks, but how did you begin to manage this then, as far as how big an area they had to graze with that virtual fence?
Well, and also water is a limiting factor with this too. So a lot of our paddocks are less than we try to get them down. Like this summer, we did a graze where our paddock was 250 acres, and they had that paddock for 2 days, and then we allowed them to extend out, and we kind of made a lane back to the water, and they really responded well to that. And then, as you know, virtual fences, the smaller your paddocks are, the more you use your batteries up. So you have to be, cognizant of that, just so that you can make it, however long you want your battery to last. We're pretty, we run them 120 days or 150 days on those batteries. And so by the end of our season, we're starting to lose some of our batteries, because we do push it probably a little more than most people. And so we don't run them that tight all summer. Usually our pastures are between 5 to 1,000 acre pastures, just depending on the landscape and our water situation.
And since you have the cattle that are kind of from spring to fall, you figure that you can get pretty much what you need on one set of batteries, so to speak, then.
Right. But we're also testing, we're working with CSU on some projects just to see if, is it beneficial for us to really push those batteries and maybe do change them out once a year. If it's, if we can improve our soil health and our grasslands, then we're willing to, look at that if the cost is effective to do it.
Right. Yeah. As I got into this topic, I think that it has a lot of different applications. And some people listening to this will say, well, I'm not in the high desert, so I'm not going to have that much pasture. And one of the limiting factors has been, as you make those pastures or paddocks, whatever we want to call them, smaller, the batteries run out. But you found that, at least for what you're doing, it seems to work pretty well with the battery life and the size of what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have.
Yeah. Do you have to go in then and, I'll say, draw those lines quite a bit, or how do you do that? Is that a cumbersome process at all to make new lines of where they're going to be grazing to?
No, it's not cumbersome at all. I don't find, usually every morning I get on and kind of look, you can look at the grazing data, see where they've gone, what they've done, and maybe they just grazed one side of the paddock, and you can make your adjustments right there on your computer in a couple minutes of, where you want them to move to. And after you get them trained, they're really quick at responding.
Right. And these are stocker cattle, correct? Not cows and calves.
Yep, stalkers.
All right. And I've heard that if they pass the line, then do you have that happen very often, that they end up going through the line and then come back to it, or what's the response, I guess, been from the cattle?
Yeah. So we do have some that, we call them road cattle that, that just go through, or, their color, maybe it's not working as properly as others. But for the most part, they like to be in the group. So they may go out, but they come back in.
Right. Right. You may not have a good answer for this, because what you're doing is over so many acres, but do you have a feel for how small of a group could this be, or how small of an acreage could this be practical for? If I have 300 acre pasture and want to divide that up, would I be hitting the line so much that the batteries would just wear down and it's not practical? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the size of operation and the size of acreage you need to make it work.
Yeah, I think you would want a larger acres, because you would be bouncing into it so often. I think that would be something that, it's probably gonna come. Technology will improve, and for those that have the smaller acreage, and you want even us, we would like to graze some of our acres tighter and put more stock density in certain places. So, but I do think it's technology, and it's gonna work that way.
Right. Well, yeah, you would think that we get better batteries, we continue to improve things and so forth. And you mentioned the towers there. I guess that's just because you have to have cell coverage of some sort in order to make those work. Is that what it takes?
Yeah, those towers actually work off of both cell coverage and satellite. It's a combination. But the once the collar hits that tower and the tower reads it, it puts the map in the collar. So if they go down in a draw and the tower's not talking to that collar, the map is still there. So they take the map with them when they drop into areas. But it does try to read, I think every 30 minutes, something like that. The tower tries to reach the collar just to see what's going on. So we know, if we've got an animal that hasn't moved, it gives us a chime that says, this animal hasn't moved. You need to go check, that kind of stuff. So if it doesn't reach the collar within 30 minutes, then I think it bumps up and tries to reach that collar every 15 minutes until it reaches it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I'm curious, has using that system then changed anything else you do, whether it is how you monitor the cattle or watching where they're grazed and you were amazed that, oh, wow, I didn't realize they spent so much time in certain areas. I'm just curious what you've learned from the whole process.
Yeah, I think it's improved our quality of life because we're not out. We were out before trying to build polywire and do those type of things, do the labor side of it. And now we get to go out. We know where the cattle are, so we can go out and see where they're grazing out, what they're grazing, what they're doing. Look at the wildlife out and enjoy things, and it's not just all a labor aspect for us.
You
I think
mentioned
one of the biggest things that's helped us is, if you can imagine 550 head of cattle running out through a 13,000 acre pasture, when you go to gather that, you got all the neighbors, it takes a couple of days. And now they're all in a certain area and we can do it in less than a day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes a huge labor difference for us.
Right. You can begin to move them wherever you need them to load out and so forth. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you take pictures and you try to look at certain areas. What have you noticed through the journey, whether it's through the virtual fencing or some of the other practices you're using on the other acres? How big of a difference have you been able to make in a short amount of time with the ground that you're grazing there?
Right. So this year from our monitoring report, we did get reductions in our average distance between our perennial plants and our soil surface. We had upward trends in our plant species richness, and we had increased plant vigor. And so those are just some of the things that we've seen the improvements for.
Right. Have you been able to tell, and maybe you don't have the data to be able to do it, but can you tell if you're gaining more average daily gain or any of those types of things, or able to stock more cattle in the future? I'm just curious what's happened on that side.
Yeah, we've improved our stock density this year quite a bit, and we're looking at our daily gains. Hopefully that'll improve also.
What other things then have you been doing? Because you mentioned the soil health, you've been very active in trying to monitor these types of things. What other practices have been working well for you out there?
I think one of the other things, and you'll probably appreciate this being a farmer, is not only on our range ground have we tried to improve, but we've tried to improve our ground under our pivots and so forth. We installed moisture sensors. We installed pivots that have, that give us a lot of data. We can slow them down, speed them up into certain areas. And so we watch our farm ground a lot closer now than we used to also.
Right. With the pivots, you do have some irrigation, but you can't get enough irrigation out to some of those grazing areas to intensively graze any of that, or do you just choose to use that as the farm ground where you'll try to grow crops or hay?
Well, we watch that really close too. It's actually a fine line between, whether we can make money off of cattle on those pivots or we can make money off of hay. Right now, we can make more money off the hay than we can cattle. But we do look at that number every year to see that, maybe we graze them this year instead of haying them. And so I'm not saying that's ever out of the question. We've even talked about doing some cover crops and changing some things up like that. And so the numbers just haven't outpaced the hay yet, but I'm not saying that won't happen at some point in time.
Do you ever foresee yourself going back to try to do year-round grazing and having stock throughout the year?
We are looking into that right now. Just maybe not being able to graze out all of the time, but yeah, we do see the purpose of, just financially, that we need this ranch to work for us 365 days of the year, not just 120 days.
Right. With the virtual fencing, you mentioned that was on the large tract there through the Colorado, I think you said parks and so forth. Have you considered using that then on other acres, or are you already, or use other types of grazing systems on that other land?
Yeah, we run the virtual fence on about 28,000 acres of land that we graze. So
yeah, it's been able to be used a lot of different places. In the time that we have left, I'm interested in what you would share then with other folks listening to this, especially those that may say, well, I'm not in high desert. I don't have that many acres, but I still know I need to do a better job with grazing and stocking and soils and so forth. What things have you learned that you would tell them, hey, be sure to look at this in your operation?
Yeah, I think because it is kind of an expensive deal to get into. I think, and there's several different companies out there that have got the virtual collars or virtual fence. I think they need to research it and find out which one works the best for them. And then I think, doing their due diligence. If they've got a small place, maybe it won't work for them. But there's companies out there that just have ear tags that monitor where the cattle go. And to me, that's kind of the same thing. But you'd have to use fences or polywire or whatever to do that. But I think doing their due diligence and talking to people that have actually got the systems in their area would be a great place to start.
Well, and by knowing where they're grazing, has that changed then any of the things that you do as far as where you graze them, knowing where they like to be? I mean, I have ideas in my mind on, okay, here's where I think my cattle are a lot of the time, but maybe you were surprised about, I didn't realize they were spending so much time in these areas.
Yeah, and that definitely did happen. And, at nighttime, you don't know where they go. So we find that out, just looking at the grazing records that we get from the virtual fence, that we can see where they are and where they've been and where they should go, and some we're looking also at overlaying that data with the LiDAR data and seeing, this is where maybe our highest quality of grass forages are right now. And so maybe we should go graze right over here right now and capture it while it's at its best quality.
Yeah, well, I sure appreciate the time. Maybe I should ask then, what's the future hold? Anything's on the horizon that you're going to be trying, experimenting with, or maybe it's just doing what you're already doing and just keep trying to do it better?
I think we're just always trying to improve and build our network of people that we surround ourselves with, so that we can improve the land that we're working with, and for the the cattle that we get to graze and the wildlife that we also manage.
Well, Mike and Dana, I really appreciate the time. I know I've learned a lot. Hopefully others have as well, and wish you the best out there in Colorado.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You have a good day.